All right, so we're jumping into this conversation about the wilderness. We've come out of this giant picture of deliverance, and I think all the time, like we as Christians and as Bible teachers, we think about the Exodus as this grand picture before Jesus of what Jesus does for us, where God delivers his people from slavery. Jesus delivers us from slavery to sin. And then I think, like, all the movies and all the, how many movies are made on Moses and that sort of stuff, but they all stop at, like, the Red Sea, or they might get as far as the Ten Commandments, but they don't journey into the wilderness because we love the set free. But the journey through the wilderness is just as much about us today as the Exodus is. And so my thing in looking at this wilderness, this wilderness series and talking about the wilderness and us is the 10 plagues and the set free from Egypt and all that. That's a picture of us set free from sin and salvation from Jesus. But man, there's a long walk between set free from sin through Jesus and set free from this world and walking into the promised land for us, into heaven. And I think the wilderness is a pretty good picture of that.
Yeah, and so just so like we're on the same page is what we're thinking about as God's people, the Israelites, they kind of represent us in this story. And then Moses in that story would represent Jesus to us.
Yeah.
And then the promised land is where they're headed, but for us, we're headed to heaven. We're headed towards eternity.
Yeah.
And we're comparing all three of these things all at the same time, and then we're seeing how that plays out for them, and then we're trying to figure, okay, how can this play out for us? What can we learn from them in this scenario, so that as we're journeying and as we're walking, maybe we can pick up some things from them. Maybe we can do some things differently as well.
Yeah, and I think what sticks out to me first in this is that Moses and God sets them free. And at the moment that they're set free, God determines a path for them through the wilderness, which is not, like it says, this is not the best way to go.
Yeah,
this is not
it's not
short,
easy terrain.
No.
Yeah.
And it's not the short path.
Yeah.
They could go the short path, but they'd have to go through an enemy. And God is leading them around that enemy. So he's leading them away from destruction. But he's also leading them to a point in the wilderness where they're going to have to depend on him.
Yeah. They're finding out again after so many years of generations of not knowing him as him being their provider again.
Yeah.
Like he's showing them, hey, I'm not just setting you free, I'm providing for you now.
Yeah.
This is a relationship that we're in together now, and now you can count on me to provide for you, to be there for you every single day.
I think we get this picture as Christians sometimes that as soon as I'm set free by Jesus, like I get to walk the easy path now.
Yeah.
And Scripture tells us over and over again that's not the case.
Yeah.
And this is this perfect picture of, he's going to lead you clear of some things, but it's not an easy path. I think it's interesting, right? In Exodus 13, I believe it's like 17 and 18 or so, it says, when Pharaoh finally let the people go, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through the Philistines' territory, even though that was the shortest route to the promised land. God said if the people are faced with battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. What's interesting, he's leading them away from battle.
Yeah.
but they're ready for battle, and I think we get a glimpse right there. Like, and we're not even going to talk about it really in the series, but the first thing he's leading them to is their first moment of, all of a sudden, we need you again, God, right there at the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Like he's leading them to that.
Yeah. He's leading them towards a victory that he's going to orchestrate on his own power. They're not going to have to fight at all, but yet at the same time, he's kind of allowing them to rally up the troops and to kind of feel this sense of unity, I think.
Yeah.
Like they're starting to feel the strength of God among them as a people again, which they haven't experienced in 400 years.
Yeah.
So they're feeling a sense of excitement of like, God's on our side. Like we've got the big guy on our side and we're going places. And you kind of see a little bit of that momentum starting to spark, I think, right here.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we sit here in the wilderness and think about the wilderness, we went to IGA today to get our food, right?
Yeah.
Like we came in here on a boat and we're sitting here camping in a beautiful place with a lake behind us. And I think about these people, like they're going into a place. They're going to have to depend on God. We're going to see that next week as we get into chapters 16 and 17. But all the way through, they're going to have to depend on God. But at the same time, I really love what he says what it says in chapter 14, verses 3 and 4. It says, "Then Pharaoh will think, the Israelites are confused. They are trapped in the wilderness." This is what Pharaoh's going to think as they head towards the Red Sea. Pharaoh's going to think they're stupid. He doesn't realize God is leading them this way. And it says, "And once again, I will harden Pharaoh's heart." This is God talking. "And he will chase after you. I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am Lord." So the Israelites camped there as they were told. And so, like, God's leading them to this place, making Pharaoh chase after them. And it's not an ideal place. And one of the things I kind of came to as I read this, like, I think God leads us into the wilderness sometimes, leads us into places that are dry and seem like they're without sustenance. And in those places, God is going to take your enemy and destroy it.
Yeah, and I think too, like the wilderness, just thinking of that topic, and that's what the title for the series is, like even just the Red Sea, that was a setting. It was just the setting that he was taking them to build a relationship with them. The Red Sea, or wherever they were going and traveling after that, those were just new settings that he kept taking them to. And that's where a place where he was creating a relationship. And it was because they needed him in those settings. They needed him to cross the Red Sea. Without his power in that setting, it wouldn't have been possible. But in that setting, they learned to trust him. They walked across the bedrock of that water because their God was revealing himself to them. And I think that's why it's so important. It's a place where a relationship was born.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to at points in this series and talking through these conversations that God knows that he's not just giving us the best things. He is the best thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think sometimes we get the idea, man, I got baptized, or now I'm with Jesus. That's the finish line.
Yeah.
No, it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
Like there's a trip through the wilderness coming.
Yeah.
And that trip through the wilderness is to take you away from all these things that you think you can lean on, you think you can depend on, and take you straight to Jesus. Because it's not his gifts that are the best thing. It's him.
It's him. Yeah, and sometimes just the storms that we walk through are the things that open our eyes the most to his power and his strength and his love. Like he's using those settings, he's using those unique situations to reveal who he is.
Yeah.
Like he's so big and he's so grand, it takes extreme situations sometimes for us to be in, like in the wilderness, to experience and be in awe of him. Because sometimes I think we get so focused on ourselves, we're more in awe of ourselves, but it takes extreme situations sometimes for us to look at him and be amazed at who he is and set our eyes on him rather than ourselves.
I think, and that's what the Israelites they're going to bounce back and forth in this time. Like they are a frustrating people.
Yeah.
And we are a frustrating people.
Yeah.
I think, it's so easy to look at them and be like, how did they not get it? Well, how do we not get it?
Yeah.
But what I still love about this wilderness deal is like God didn't just send them out into the wilderness. He didn't just like say go, like there's your path, go. Right after God commands them to go to the wilderness, he says, and I'm going ahead of you. In verses 20 and 21 of chapter 13, he says, I'm going ahead of you. They camped on the edge of the wilderness, and God goes ahead of them in the wilderness. And in the day, like, he's this big pillar of cloud, and at night he's this blazing fire that they get to follow, which is, at that I do sometimes think, like, okay, how did you miss the blazing fire in front of you? Like, that's kind of hard to miss.
Pretty significant,
right? Yeah. But what I love about that is God wasn't just sending them on their way to teach them a lesson. He was going out ahead of them. I think back when I was a kid. When I was a kid, we lived out in the country, kind of like where we are tonight. And there was thousands of acres of woods behind our house, and there was a field that went about 400 yards back into the woods. And my brother one night sitting at the dinner table accepted a challenge to walk all the way to the back of that field after dark. And my dad was like, okay, we're going to see how he does with this challenge. But as soon as my brother walked out the door, my dad ran around, walked out the front door, and ran out ahead of him. And walked out ahead of him just a little bit in the edge of the woods where my brother couldn't see him. But the whole way, like, my dad knew the whole way, like, if Cameron was okay. Yeah. And I think there's a sense of that in God. Yeah. Like, he's leading you into the wilderness. He knows that there is good discipline in the wilderness. He knows that he needs to bring you something in the wilderness. But he's not pushing you out the door. He's not pushing you further than he's going out ahead of you. He is leading you there. And so I think that's an important concept to get a handle on. Yeah. Is that all these places that seem difficult as you walk through spiritual discipline, God is going ahead of you there. Yeah, God's not surprised by your difficulty. God's not surprised by your feeling of depression. God's not surprised by, your struggle with this sin. God's not surprised, whatever's going on. He already went ahead of you there, and he met you right there.
Yeah, and I think in the wilderness too, there's a sense of tension, because at one hand, you're always longing for God to show you these miracles and just to rescue you from things, but at the same time, as they're traveling, he allows them to suffer. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of tension in between those two places, but I think that's for us as Christ followers, that's where we really grow the most, is we're in this sense of tension. And I think that sometimes even more in the suffering, we grow more from that place, because that's where that sense of trusting really starts to develop. Like, if you're not in a setting where you have to trust, then how are you going to learn to do that? Yeah. And I think he allows them to do that. And we think sometimes, well, God's not loving if he allows that. No, he does. He loves you so much that he's doing whatever is necessary to build a relationship that will last. Yeah. It's not going to fall away. He's creating something that will last, and he's bringing that into eternity. And I think that's powerful. Like, he cares, and that's like a relationship between a child and a parent. We do what we have to do because we love our children, and we need to set them up to be able to walk a good life and follow a good path, and he's setting us up to do that as well. I think.
Yeah, I love. We just got out of a few weeks ago this series on Hebrews chapter 12 in the Unshakable series. We skipped over chapter or verse 11, but it says something really good to this. It says, "No discipline is enjoyable while it is happening. It's painful, but afterward there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way." Yeah. And so basically what the writer of Hebrews says there is, hey, no good father doesn't discipline his children. Exactly. And the discipline is not enjoyable for the children, but it leads to a path that is right. And I think what we see, it leads to a path of life. Yeah. That's what God's leading us to.
And if what they're coming out of is slavery, what we're coming out of is sin, we need some tension in that fight, because sin is so tempting to us. Yeah. So if there's no tension among us trying to be taken away from sin, we're going to keep going back to it. We're going to keep drawing back to it like a fly towards light. We need God to create a little bit of tension in our lives, so we feel the weight of what's happening. Yeah. Otherwise, we underplay everything that's happening, and we just go along with the crowd who's who's following sin.
I think where we're ending up here, I think is perfect. That the wilderness is the place where God sends us, both to lead us away from things that He knows would destroy us,
Yeah.
and to lead us into things that He knows are difficult, but asks us to depend on Him. And
Yeah.
so the more we learn to depend on Him, the better off we are in the wilderness.